This former child star made the conscious decision to remove herself from the industry, famously known for her role as Sam Puckett on iCarly, a show and character loved by many people. But was there a darker reason for Jennette's sudden departure from the spotlight?
I mean, I don't think young people should be allowed to be famous.
The former actress has returned to answer this question in her tell-all memoir that's breaking cultural boundaries surrounding silence.
I absolutely felt violated.
Everything from the darkness she endured as a child in the acting industry, the creator tells me, I honestly try, but I can't bring myself to do it. My body is stiff.
Come on! Give up the juice!
The unexpected twist of family betrayal.
Wow. It's like I lost you in that character. It's like you weren't even my daughter.
And the hardships of grief.
Everybody who dies is suddenly the greatest person in the world, and that's how you need to view them.
Let's dive into the story of Jennette McCurdy. Child star. It's a title millions vie for, and scarcely any successfully nab. But when it came to Jennette McCurdy, it appeared the actress was one of those chosen few. Yet the California-born star's rise to fame had less to do with luck than perseverance. Jennette landed her first role on Mad TV, and from 2001 to early 2007 took on 22 different projects, including Malcolm in the Middle, Zoe 101, and Will and Grace. But it wasn't until Jennette was cast on a wildly popular Nickelodeon original that the actress would be exposed to the hallmarks and shortcomings of fame. Jennette was cast on iCarly, a show about two girls, Carly Shay and Sam Puckett, who hosted a web show with the help of their friend and technical producer Freddie Benson. Jennette played the role of Sam, Carly's food-obsessed, tough love co-host. And despite the show's deceptively simple premise, the series was a raging success. During the height of iCarly's popularity, Jennette also worked on a few movies, including Minor Details, Fred the Movie, and Best Player. But with recognition from the Kids' Choice Awards, the Teen Choice Awards, and even the Emmys, there was no doubt iCarly was Jennette's claim to fame. Still, every series must come to an end, and after 5 seasons, iCarly took its graceful exit in 2012.
And this has been iCarly.
But that was not the end for Sam Puckett. Jennette reprised the role in 2013 for Sam and Cat, a series where Sam, along with her friend Kat Valentine from Victorious, played by soon-to-be global superstar Ariana Grande, started a babysitting service. But despite the similar ingredients, the series' proved success is not easily replicated. Sam and Kat may have been beloved characters, but, as the Washington Post noted, the hearts of stars who were in their early 20s didn't seem invested in the kiddie program. There was also speculation of an on-set feud between the two leads that was only fueled by rumors that Ariana was being paid more than Jennette. The series was canceled after its first season. After its cancellation, Jennette disputed the feud, telling E! That she and Ariana were and are extremely close. As the show dissolved, everybody wanted to find some sort of hidden meaning in our relationship. Some like drama, and I think we butted heads at times, but in a very sisterly way. She knows me so well, and I know her so well, that I think it was unfortunate that things kind of got misconstrued, Jennette told the publication. According to the actress, her bond with Ariana could be described with the same word she used for her relationship with iCarly co-star Miranda Cosgrove: impenetrable. But other relationships in Jennette's life didn't prove to be as solid. In 2013, the Sam and Cat star had a brief courtship with NBA player Andre Drummond. Their relationship blossomed after Andre posted Jennette as his Woman Crush Wednesday online, but shortly wilted after a week or so. After the two had split up, Jennette joked about Andre's kissing technique to Nerdist.com. I stood on a chair. I sort of went for it, but it wasn't great. It didn't go great. No sparks, and the mouth, the shapes weren't right, the actress said. Andre spoke to TMZ and said he found the comments funny, but planned to be the mature person about the situation and let it die out. Later, intimate photos of Jennette were leaked to the web, a coincidence Andre claimed he played no part in, while Jennette alluded to more, tweeting, "I sent those pics to one person. You can connect the dots." Despite these relatively minor PR mishaps, Jennette's career didn't appear to falter post-Nickelodeon. After the role of Sam Puckett had been permanently put to bed, Jennette went on to different projects, including TV shows like Comedy Bang Bang and animated shows like Robot Chicken. The actress even had her own directorial era from 2017 to 2019, including the titles 8 Bodies, Strong Independent Women, Kenny, and an autobiographical TV movie simply titled The McCurdys. In 2018, Jennette took a role in a short film titled The First Lady, and with that final credit to her resume, Jennette quietly retired from acting. It seemed Jennette had done the impossible, exited the industry unscathed. If only that had been the case. In March 2019, Jennette discussed her ED for the first time in an essay she wrote for HuffPost. It had been 2 years since Jennette had been in recovery, and the actress finally felt stable enough to tell her story, at least part of it. Jennette's ED had followed her from age 11 to age 23, when she finally decided to start seeing a specialist. Recovery was brutal. It felt like breaking up with a bad boyfriend whom I loved even though I knew I shouldn't. He treated me poorly, he ruined my life, he consistently devastated me, and yet, without him, who was I really? The former actress wrote. On her YouTube channel, Jennette went into more depth about the recovery process.
I thought once I went into recovery that I'd be like walking along a white sand beach slowly with my hair billowing behind me, just feeling like, oh, I'm better, I'm well now. No, that is not what recovery is, okay? Recovery is brutal.
It turned out healing her ED hadn't healed her life.
For me, my eating disorder was sadly a way that I was coping with the challenges of life. So getting rid of the eating disorder meant that I was now just coping with the challenges of life. It's not that the challenges of life went away.
But Jennette found ways to cope. With the spare time she gained from no longer obsessing over food, the former child star decided to write.
I had always loved writing. It had always been a great outlet for me, a great creative resource for me, and it just took on a whole new meaning and gave my life a whole bigger purpose during that time.
While viewers applauded the openness and eloquence Jennette spoke with, there was a ripple of shock amongst viewers who had known the actress for her portrayal of the food-loving Sam Puckett. In January 2020, Jennette spoke about her ED on the Minimalists podcast. She described the way EDs were normalized in the industry.
If you're at a Teen Vogue party and they're passing around hors d'oeuvres and you go to grab an hors d'oeuvre, it's like you'll get the side eye from another person like, oh my, you're taking a crostini? Like, this is insane.
Jennette also spoke about the emotions she was left to confront after recovering.
I was just confronted with all those feelings that I'd been bottling up and suppressing and shoving down for so long, and that was so difficult.
It's possible some of these pent-up emotions were unleashed on screen in Jennette's autobiographical film, The McCurdys. But this time, the trauma wasn't about food.
He touched me.
Where did he touch you? Show me where he touched you.
I don't wanna.
Come on. You can do it.
No, I really don't wanna.
Although Jennette has since privated the 2017 short film on Vimeo, in 2019, she posted this scene to YouTube.
And cut!
But what was the clip attempting to communicate?
Wow. It's like I lost you in that character.
Viewers felt the former actress was hinting at something. Some claimed the clip was stealthily calling out her experience at Nickelodeon while working with a certain creator. Others viewed the scene as a sobering glimpse into the life of a child actor. It's just depressing how parents sell their kids into the entertainment industry and don't care about what's actually going on inside the industry. This brought me to tears. Acting or not, no girl should ever have to go through something so traumatizing. In July 2020, Jennette's honesty streak continued on a new format.
I can't believe the words I'm about to say, and yet here we are. I'm already dreading saying it. Let's get this over fast. Okay, here we go. Let's get it out. I'm gonna say it. I'm starting a podcast. I'm sorry. I'm starting a podcast. I know I can't believe I've stooped this low.
That's right. As the musical announcement confirmed, Jennette had started a podcast. The show was called Empty Inside, and each episode consisted of Jennette and a different guest having conversations about those raw subjects, thoughts, and stories most people never have the guts to voice.
I want to talk today about rejection.
On the podcast, Jennette wasn't afraid to show her guests she was human.
We've all heard the success story, right? We've all heard it a million times of like, oh, and then I fought, and now I'm Oprah Winfrey. And it's like, what about the non-Oprahs?
The former iCarly star made no effort to edit herself as she spoke about the less flattering results of self-exploration.
Like all the hours that I've spent trying to work on the codependency, and I think, well, at the end of the day, am I trying to work on my codependency so I'm more appealing to a man? Like, is that what's motivating this?
And consistently copped to her own faults.
I was a complete people pleaser, complete pushover, like anxious, just wanted to land my mark and say my line, teacher's pet, like just annoying.
Yeah, but as we know through articles and interviews, Jennette's transparency wasn't limited to her own podcast. On The Minimalist, Jennette discussed the cultural desire to see child stars fall from grace.
People are even more interested in seeing a former child star fail. I don't understand the fascination with it.
But then, Jennette didn't seem to understand America's infatuation with fame in general.
I'm not sure what makes a person good at fame, but I felt incredibly anxious.
It turned out Jennette had not enjoyed her time in the spotlight.
I definitely just did not want to be famous. I didn't like the experience, and I couldn't wait till I could just put that aside.
In fact, she didn't support children being famous at all.
I don't think young people should be allowed to be famous. Like, if there's somebody who could come in and say, no, they can't, they're not mentally capable of handling this, I think that should happen.
Why had Jennette's days as a child star left such a sour taste in her mouth? Had the hijinks, a laugh track, and random dancing on Nickelodeon distracted the audience from what was really going on? Jennette may have washed her hands of her former occupation, but that wasn't going to stop her past from resurfacing in a new form. In December 2020, Nickelodeon announced plans for an adult-geared reboot of iCarly for Paramount+, and Jennette made one thing clear: she would not be a part of it. The former actress told her podcast listeners she had quit the entertainment industry. "I'm so ashamed of the parts I've done in the past. I resent my career in a lot of ways," she said. "I feel so unfulfilled by the roles that I played and felt like it was the most cheesy, embarrassing. I did the shows I was on from like 13 to 21, and by 15, I was already embarrassed." The iCarly reboot went ahead without Sam Puckett, premiering in June 2021 with original castmates Miranda Cosgrove, Nathan Kress, and Jerry Trainor returning. Just days after the show's premiere, Jennette was interviewed for the Iced Coffee Hour podcast. And although the episode mainly focused on her decision to sell her house, Jennette briefly spoke about her experience as a child actor.
I just remember constant stress.
So why did Jennette enter the industry? Well, it was a decision that had nothing to do with her.
My mom was quite erratic and kind of just like screaming and wailing and crying about not having enough. And so when she put me into acting, I kind of got the message and understood the mission and just was like a little kind of soldier.
Deborah McCurdy, Jennette's mother, a woman who had passed away almost 9 years ago, was about to become the subject of her daughter's 2022 debut memoir. And if the title was any indicator, there were no worries that Jennette's book would be overly favorable toward her mother.
This is my book. I'm glad my mom died. I'm so proud of it. I'm so excited about it. I can't believe it's real. I hold it in my hands and I'm just giddy.
On August 2nd, 2022, Jennette spoke about the book and its divisive title. And it seemed the author was more than prepared for the array of responses those 5 words would provoke.
I've been doing a lot of press for the book and people were like, "Did you know that the title is kind of in your face, kind of attention grabbing?" Yes, I was aware. I did, pick the title myself.
Jennette stood by the title, and she believed readers would too once they finished the book.
It's something that I mean with a lot of sincerity. And I think it's a title that I earned throughout the writing of the book. I'm quite confident that by the end of the book, you'll understand why I've called it I'm Glad My Mom Died.
According to the writer, nothing about the book had been a rushed decision. She'd taken her time, not only in writing, but in those steps she needed to take before putting metaphorical pen to paper.
I had done a lot of processing of the stuff that I talk about in the book through therapy. It had been years of processing and years of working through all this stuff privately. And in no way would I go anywhere near exploring something creatively or in a public-facing way had I not done a lot of that.
But now, Jennette was ready for the world to hear her story, one she believed was worth telling.
It was not easy to come to terms with that reality and also to come to terms with my mom's abuse and the reality of my childhood. And I feel like sometimes the most uncomfortable things to say are the things that need to be said the most.
On August 9th, 2022, Jennette's memoir was finally released, and readers were hardly prepared for the painful truths the writer had released onto the page. I'm Glad My Mom Died is nearly 300 pages and divided into 2 sections, before and after. These are in relation to the key event of the memoir, Jennette's mother's passing. Deborah McCurdy was the guiding force in Jennette's life. She could turn her daughter's head in whatever direction she chose because, despite what the title of the book might imply, Jennette loved her mother. Deborah was precious to Jennette. She was her mother, her best friend, and, perhaps above all else, a survivor. Jennette's mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer when Jennette was a toddler. This was a fact no one in the McCurdy household could forget. Not Jennette, not her 3 brothers, not her father, not her grandparents. Even though Deborah had beaten the disease, its presence loomed in follow-up visits at the hospital, in anecdotes her mother delivered to strangers, in constant reminders. The McCurdys were left waiting and dreading the moment cancer reclaimed Deborah's body. The best way I can describe it is that, for as far back as I can remember, The air in the house has felt like a held breath, Jennette wrote. In an interview with Amanpour and Company, Jennette described cancer as an immovable part of her mother's being.
From an early age, I learned, okay, this is what's important to mom, is that she's a survivor and she's a cancer survivor. That's who she is.
And if anyone in the McCurdy household forgot about Deborah's battle, a weekly rewatch of a home video she recorded following her diagnosis was there to jog her memory. Jennette and her brothers found these watch parties uncomfortable. They didn't want to see their mother in that state. They didn't want to be reminded of how close they came to losing her. Still, they watched. For her. There's another reason Jennette hated the post-Sunday service viewing, and it involved her own behavior. In the background of the video, a 2-year-old Jennette sang Jingle Bells, which her mother always pointed out as deeply inappropriate given the weight of what she was going through. On a weekly basis, Jennette was forced to face this guilt. How could I have not sensed what mom needed, Jennette would ask herself. That she needed all of us to be serious, to be taking the situation as hard as we possibly could, to be devastated. She needed us to be nothing without her. It was this knowledge that her mom had been sick and could be sick again that became Jennette's compass in life. The fragility of mom's life is the center of mine, Jennette wrote. No one understood Deborah the way Jennette did. As a child, she became an expert tiptoeing around any part of her mother's potential triggers, navigating her mood swings, and feeding her the responses she wanted to hear. Jennette elaborated on her childhood mindset in an interview on CBC's Q.
I just remember my whole life being sort of oriented to her and orchestrated around her and what she wanted and what she needed and what would make her happy in any moment.
So when Deborah told Jennette she was going to help Jennette become an actress, there was only one response: yes. After a rough start, Jennette finally found her niche in the industry, an ability to cry on cue. On Iced Coffee Hour, Jennette had previously spoken about the types of gig this trademark would land her.
I got a lot of really sad kid roles, like a lot of guest episodes of, Law and Order or Judging Amy, Without a Trace, the really sad children.
To do this, Jennette would imagine tragedy striking members of her family. For this to work, the scenario had to be fresh, and Deborah was always there to help her daughter imagine a new tragedy. She'd tell Jennette to imagine her brother's spinal tap went wrong, or that her grandpa was in the hospital bed clutching the sock doll Jennette made him when she was 6. But before one audition, Jennette was hit with the realization this ability had vanished. She could no longer muster tears. The emotional well she dug from had dried up. Jennette viewed this as her body protecting her. A part of me is resisting my mind forcing this emotional trauma on itself. A part of me is saying, no, it's too painful, I'm not doing this, Jennette wrote. But tears or no tears, Jennette had established a name for herself in the industry. And she had other assets. She could memorize lines, dance, and, above all, she was small for her age, which allowed her to audition for younger characters and work longer hours than kids who were actually that age. And as we know, by age 11, Jennette had developed some disordered tendencies to stay small. But this behavior wasn't inherent, it was taught. And Jennette's teacher was none other than Mommy Dearest. As Jennette started acting, Deborah fixated on her daughter's appearance, dyeing the child's eyelashes, highlighting her hair, and whitening her teeth to compete with other hopeful child actors.
Just very, very much an uncomfortable thing for a 6-year-old to be sitting in,
6 years old, by the way. I want to say that again. 6 years old.
Yeah, 6 years old. Very uncomfortable.
And Deborah was always there to remind her daughter what a gift her youth was. If I start to grow up, Mom won't love me as much, Jennette thought as a child. She often weeps and holds me really tight and says she just wants me to stay small and young. In an interview with ABC News, it seemed Jennette could now see her mother's yearning for what it was, a control tactic.
I think she really wanted to have her influence on me, and me growing up was a threat to that.
But at the time, Jennette wasn't about to let what she thought was love slip away. I'm determined to not grow up. I'll do anything to stop it from happening, Jennette thought. But maturation comes for everyone, and it was coming for Jennette. She was developing, and despite her body preparing to grow up, Jennette wasn't. There had to be a way to stop this from happening. She went to her mother for advice. Well, sweetheart, if you really want to know how to stay small, there's this secret thing you can do. It's called calorie restriction, Deborah told her. Her mother became her dietitian, tracking her calories, planning her meals, and weighing and measuring her progress. On cue, Jennette described the experience from her childhood perspective as almost whimsical.
Like, the way that I saw it at the time was that we were best friends. In my mind, it was like a Parent Trap montage where they're doing the hand jives, they're
jumping and clicking their heel. They're doing the little like shake.
And much to Jennette and Deborah's delight, Jennette was shrinking. Calorie restriction has brought me and Mom closer than we already were, which is really saying something because we were already so close. Calorie restriction is wonderful, the child actor thought. In Jennette's 2019 story for HuffPost, she wrote that she didn't think her mother could help it. Deborah had her own struggles that had led to multiple hospitalizations for an ED as a teenager. And as an adult, she continued her unhealthy eating habits, which Jennette came to normalize. At the time, instead of being bothered by her suggestions, I remember thinking that she was actually helping me, that she got it more than the other moms, and that she wanted me to be successful, Jennette wrote in HuffPost. By each committing to consuming less, they fed each other's sickness.
The more entrenched you are in that disease, the instinct is to latch onto other people who are that entrenched in the disease. That was absolutely what happened with my mom and I.
But there were people who called out the behavior for what it was: disordered. When Jennette was weighed at the doctor's office, she came in 2 pounds over what she was at home. She was devastated. We'll talk about it later, her mother said before the child star could come up with an excuse. But the doctor was more concerned about what Jennette's weight suggested. The doctor asked to speak to Deborah privately, but young Jennette overheard the conversation. She heard the doctor tell her mother Jennette's weight was significantly lower than what was normal for her age. She heard her mother play dumb, denying any changes in Jennette's eating habits. The doctor told Deborah to keep an eye on what her daughter ate. Jennette's mother agreed. After all, she'd been doing just that. A mother of a child in Jennette's dance class also spoke to Jennette's mother about Jennette's decrease in weight and suggested she see a specialist. Jennette watched her mother wave off the attempted advice. If anybody asks, just tell them you're eating normally, Jennette recalled her mother telling her in HuffPost. Up until these comments, Jennette hadn't thought she and her mother were doing anything wrong.
I could sense concern in people around me, and I started piecing together, I don't know if reality is mom's reality.
Jennette couldn't understand why her mother, her best friend, would lie. Was there something wrong about what they were doing? Were mothers meant to let their little girls grow up? On the Chicks in the Office podcast, Jennette admitted this was the first time she had thought her mother might not have her best interests at heart, but she couldn't handle believing anything negative about her mother, the survivor.
As a coping mechanism, I would just tamp it down, I would just shove it away, I'd just, ignore it because it was too scary and threatening of a thought to confront.
Unfortunately, this wasn't the only way Deborah marked her control over Jennette's body. On ABC News, Jennette singled out one chapter of the book as testament to not only how far the book pushed readers, but to how far it pushed Jennette as a writer.
This was the hardest part of the book for me to write about. It was a really emotional experience. I laughed during the writing of it, and then I cried a lot after I wrote that vignette.
What the writer was referring to was the 27th chapter of I'm Glad My Mom Died. Growing up, Jennette wasn't afforded the privacy other girls her age were. Her mother followed her to set, to acting class, even showering. Jennette wasn't left alone. Deborah claimed she had to shower Jennette because her daughter's hair was so long and such a specific texture that only she knew how to manage it as a former hairstylist. Often, Jennette and her brother Scotty were showered together when their mother was too busy to give separate showers, to both of their embarrassment. Scott asked if he could shower himself once. Mom sobbed and said she didn't want him to grow up, so he never asked again after that, the author wrote. Jennette herself wasn't allowed to shower alone until she was 17. It seemed Deborah, who didn't want Jennette to change clothing size, preferred ice cream flavor, or favorite color, wanted her children to stay as they were, in her control. During Jennette's showers, her mother would perform body exams on Jennette, telling her she's checking for lumps that could be cancerous. As her mother performed these exams, Jennette would occupy her mind with thoughts of Disneyland. By the time the exams are done, a huge wave of relief washes over my body, and I usually realize that's the first time I felt my body since the exams started. It's weird. When the exams are happening, I feel like I'm outside of myself. Like my body is a shell I'm disconnected from, and I'm living entirely in my thoughts, Jennette wrote. Even today, the author has trouble understanding her mother's motivations for what she did.
I've tried to understand, and that didn't lead me anywhere productive.
But what Jennette has been able to sort out are her own feelings towards what happened.
I absolutely felt violated, and eventually accepting that was the most, I think, integral piece to my own healing and recovery.
Of course, I'm Glad My Mom Died also goes over Jennette's big break, iCarly. Although the show presented the child star with its own share of trials, There was one silver lining that came in the form of Jennette's co-star, Miranda Cosgrove. The author was immediately in awe of iCarly's lead. Miranda held freedom Jennette didn't. She listened to Gwen Stefani, swore, went to get food without any supervision. She also wasn't religious, a fact Jennette's Mormon mother cited as a reason for her daughter to keep her distance. Still, Jennette desperately wanted to be friends with Miranda. If only either one of them could build up the nerve to start a conversation. Eventually, the two found a way to communicate through the instant messaging platform AIM. And that virtual friendship blossomed into a real-life friendship that remained a shining light during and after their time on Nickelodeon.
She was a friend at a time in my life when I really needed one, and she was just so there for me, and I hope I was there for her in the same way.
Miranda and Jennette would have sleepovers where they'd watch Dance Moms, go for late-night drives, and relate to each other on a level only two kids in the industry could. And although their friendship might not be the same as it once was,
your friendships that you think when you're 20 years old, you're like, these are my absolute, the friends that will be on my deathbed, we'll be playing bingo and clutching each other's hands and watching Jeopardy, that shifts.
Jennette still holds their time together dearly.
We're not as close as we used to be, but it was just totally a natural, I guess, aging.
But the writer doesn't carry that same soft spot for the other aspects of her time on Nickelodeon. Jennette was playing a character just as defined by the intake of food as Jennette had defined herself by her denial. Fans would stop her on the street, shouting about fried chicken or Sam's token butter sock. And, as Jennette explained on cue, she couldn't help her reaction.
My whole body would kind of stiffen and I'd think like, oh God, because I knew what was going on underneath it. But at that, I was nowhere near at a place where I was able to share that experience.
Yet, looking back, Jennette saw the humor of her predicament.
Who could write that, right? The fact that I'm suffering from these eating disorders while also playing a character who loves food. I think it's very entertaining.
But it wasn't only playing Sam Puckett that Jennette had to grapple with. It was the toxic work environment personified by the set's resident dark cloud, a person Jennette only refers to as the creator. Jennette describes the creator as a Jekyll and Hyde type who builds cast and crew up just as easily as he tears them down. When the creator was feeling generous, he might provide a standing ovation for some exemplary work on set, a heartfelt speech, or a touching compliment. But when the creator wasn't in such a giving mood, well, anyone in his way became an opportunity for target practice. His alleged malice could range from firing a 6-year-old on the spot for messing up a few lines on a rehearsal day, to telling a boom operator who interrupted a take that he hoped that he would regret it for the rest of his life. The creator made Jennette feel the same way her mother did, powerless. When the creator promised Jennette and her mother that he would eventually give Jennette her own show, the actress tried to show the same level of excitement as her mother, but admitted a part of her was scared of him, and the idea that she'd have to do everything he wanted was intimidating to her. The creator was also responsible for concerning requests. Jennette explained the creator explicitly asked for bikinis for one of the photo shoots she had to do, despite Jennette being a child at the time. I'm terrified of being looked at like a being. It's disgusting. I'm a child, Jennette recalled. The creator also pushed the boundaries of their relationship. When the two were out for dinner alone, he pressured Jennette into taking a sip of his adult beverage after telling her the kids on Victorious always partook. He then put his hand on her knee, and after that massaged her shoulders, telling her she was so tense. Not wanting to offend him, Jennette stayed silent, but buried under her people-pleasing nature was a growing resentment for the person who put her in this situation, her mother. Child stardom is a trap, a dead end, and I can see that even if mommy can't, Jennette thought. She wanted this, and I wanted her to have it. I wanted her to be happy. But now that I have it, I realize that she's happy and I'm not. Her happiness came at the cost of mine. I feel robbed and exploited. But any epiphanies over her mother's mistreatment of her were derailed by one of life's many curveballs. At 18, the moment Jennette had been dreading her whole life arrived. Deborah's cancer had made a terminal comeback. After learning of her mother's diagnosis, Jennette's ED that had been so defined by restriction manifested into binging. During this time, Jennette had also started a relationship with Joe, a co-worker in his 30s. She'd been keeping this relationship private from her mother and had even hidden that she and Joe were going to the Four Seasons Resort in Maui together, courtesy of Nickelodeon's season wrap gift. I feel the wedge between Mom and I growing by the day. With every lie I tell, I feel myself slipping further away from her. With every pound I gain, every binge I partake in, I feel myself getting more disconnected from her, Jennette wrote. But 3 days into the trip, paparazzi caught the couple paddleboarding. The next morning, Jennette was greeted by numerous missed calls, voicemails, and email notifications from Deborah. The photos had been published. In the first email Jennette opened, her mother wrote about how disappointed she was that her perfect little angel had become a floozy. The email went on to attack Jennette's character, morality, and appearance. Add that to the list of things you are. Liar, conniving, evil. You look pudgier too. It's clear you're eating your guilt. You're an ugly monster now. I told your brothers about you, and they all said they disown you just like I do. We want nothing to do with you. Love, Mom. Or should I say, Deb, since I am no longer your mother, Deborah wrote. She ended the message with a PS. Send money for a new fridge. Ours broke. In another message, Deborah told her daughter that she'd posted a message about Jennette in her fan club in an attempt to get them to dissociate from her daughter the same way she had. Deborah claimed she was more worthy of her daughter's fan base and planned to steal them by starting her own Vine account. And in another message, Jennette's mother told her daughter, "You caused my cancer to come back. I hope you're happy knowing this. You have to live with this fact. You gave me cancer." Jennette pleaded for forgiveness, and in the end, the situation, just like similar volatile outbursts from Deborah throughout the book, was swept under the rug. In 2013, after multiple close calls, her mother passed away in hospice while surrounded by Jennette and the rest of her family. But Jennette's immediate reaction was a complex mix of emotions.
I was devastated, and then I felt a wisp of relief, and immediately the guilt and the shame kick in of, oh no, I can't feel relief that Mom died.
No, Jennette couldn't let herself feel anything other than despair. This was the woman she built her life around. And without her, that foundation was crumbling.
I realized, I don't know who I am now. I don't know who I am without her because I was living for her.
Now commenced the after portion of the book. At this point, Jennette had already started working on Sam and Cat, her promised show that came with the unpromised co-lead, Ariana Grande. Jennette was forced to share the spotlight, at least when her scene partner showed up to rehearsals. See, with a budding music career, Ariana missed a good portion of shooting, and that meant the crew and Jennette had to work around her absence. Jennette was applauded for being a good sport, but in private, she'd become bitter. She didn't like being a good sport, a people pleaser, or any other compliment used to describe someone devoid of a backbone. People-pleasing had gotten her where she was in life, a place her mother strived for and she resented. Jennette had also become jealous. She was jealous of the ease Ariana seemed to float through life with. She was jealous the show wasn't really her own. She was jealous of Ariana's prospering career. It didn't help that Ariana would come on set and broadcast her latest successes, including performances at award shows, cover shoots, and one boast that Jennette found particularly hard to bear.
I was jealous specifically that she played charades with Tom Hanks. That's what got me. Charades with Tom Hanks.
How dare she?
I know.
Still, there was one saving grace that would make all Jennette's suffering on set worthwhile. The creator had promised Jennette that she'd be able to direct an episode. Finally, she'd be taken seriously, as an adult and not just a child star. But just as easily as the opportunity was presented to her, it was taken away. No one on set would give Jennette a reason for why she was no longer set to direct, but after the actress had a panic attack on set, a producer came to speak with her privately. The producer told Jennette that although they had vouched for her, the situation was beyond their control. There's somebody else here who doesn't want you to direct. Very badly, they don't want you to direct. So badly that they said they would quit the show if you did, and we can't afford that, they told her. As for who quashed Jennette's dream, well, that remained a mystery. Safe to say, when Jennette was notified by her team that Sam and Cat was canceled, the actress was elated to finally cut her ties with Nickelodeon. Not so fast. The network had left her something to remember them by, $300,000. So, what was the catch? The only thing they want you to do is never talk publicly about your experience at Nickelodeon, one of her managers told her. What was presented as a parting gift looked a lot like hush money to Jennette. She gave a decisive no to the offer, a decision Jennette acknowledged wasn't without downsides.
Leaning against, I think I talk about this in the book, but I lean against my bed and I'm like, oh shoot, that could put my nieces through college. Like, that was some good money.
Still, there was something about Jennette's stance that felt right.
Even if it was informed by self-righteousness, I think I did something that was really hard to do. Oh my God, it makes me emotional. I'm proud of myself.
It was one of the first major decisions the actor had made without her mother.
I think I've chosen a path of integrity. And it hasn't always been easy.
Now that Jennette was done with Nickelodeon, she was left with a legacy she'd never asked for. I'm cemented in people's minds as the person I was when I was a kid. The world won't let me be anyone else. The world only wants me to be Sam Puckett, Jennette wrote. Her shot at directing, her childhood, her mother, life had robbed her of a lot. But Jennette still had control over one area: food. Sure, she couldn't stop the binging that had started when her mother became sick again, but Jennette had a new trick up her sleeve: purging. But her ED wasn't without a price. According to her HuffPost article, she paid for the disorder in a damaged throat, burst blood vessels, and the loss of a tooth. Eventually, Jennette's ED led her to a therapist named Laura, who had a nurturing approach Jennette quickly grew fond of. Still, there were some lines nobody could cross. Jennette stopped seeing Laura after she suggested Jennette attend an inpatient treatment facility. At least, that's what Jennette claimed in her HuffPost piece. In I'm Glad My Mom Died, it seemed Jennette hadn't left because Laura had suggested inpatient treatment. She left because Laura started asking questions about Deborah. When Laura asked about her mother, Jennette chose what she shared carefully. Deborah looked after her and her brothers. Deborah told Jennette she was her best friend. Deborah helped her stay young by teaching her calorie restriction. But Laura couldn't sugarcoat Deborah's parenting the same way Jennette did.
This was me sharing stories in a very, very guarded way. And the therapist said, Jennette, what you're talking about is abuse. Do you understand that?
If what Laura was saying was true, it meant Jennette's belief that her mother was only looking out for her best interests had been a lie. And if that had been a lie, who had all of this been for?
It just meant reframing everything, and it was too daunting and overwhelming at first.
Jennette never came back for another session with Laura, but Jennette started taking control of her life and doing what was best for her, not her mother. Jennette started seeing an ED specialist. She left a codependent relationship she was in, and after spending 18 years of her life dedicated to acting, Jennette quit. She wanted to focus on recovery, and that meant being away from the toxicity of the industry. I want my life to be in my hands, not an ED's or a casting director's or an agent's or my mom's. Mine, she wrote. Jennette wanted her life to feel full, not deprived. I think of Mom. I don't want to become her. I don't want to live on chewy granola bars and steamed vegetables. I don't want to spend my life restricting and dog-earing Women's World fad diet pages. Mom didn't get better, but I will. And slowly but surely, she did get better. I'm Glad My Mom Died ends with Jennette visiting her mother's grave. Every day. That's how often her mother made her promise she would visit. Following her passing, Jennette had felt guilty for only coming to the grave weekly. But as she came less and less, that guilt faded. The writer looked at her mother's stone, inscribed with the many adjectives her family used to describe Deborah: brave, kind, funny, and so on. Was she any of those things, Jennette pondered? Time and grief have the ability to soften the past, smoothing out any unsightly cracks. Why do we romanticize the dead? Why can't we be honest about them, especially moms? They're the most romanticized of anyone, Jennette wrote. Instead of Deborah's passing washing away her parental sins, it had allowed Jennette the space to look at her relationship with her mother for what it was: complicated. She could now see her mother didn't deserve the pedestal she placed her on. She was a narcissist. She refused to admit she had any problems, despite how destructive those problems were to our entire family. My mom emotionally, mentally, and physically abused me in ways that will forever impact me, she wrote. The lasting trauma from years of abuse, the childhood never ventured, the learned ED, this was the inheritance Deborah left Jennette with. Her death left me with more questions than answers, more pain than healing, and many layers of grief. The initial grief from her passing, then the grief of accepting her abuse and exploitation of me, and finally, the grief that surfaces now when I miss her and start to cry, because I do still miss her, the author wrote. Jennette's perspective might seem strange in our all-or-nothing culture, where loving someone and holding them accountable stand at opposing ends. It's a duality that frustrated Jennette herself.
I'd feel really angry and confused at why I felt angry that I was grieving her. I felt like she didn't deserve my tears and my sadness since she was abusive.
But through writing the book, the author found a balance between her anger and love, proving children still mourn imperfect parents.
Like I'm able to just miss her, and I think that is only possible because of the healing that happened through the writing of the book.
Jennette admitted that she imagined scenarios where her mother was still alive, where she'd apologize and they'd manage to start anew. But the writer was aware this dream contrasts with who her mother was. Mom made it very clear she had no interest in changing. If she were still alive, she'd still be trying her best to manipulate me into being who she wants me to be, she wrote. And without the space provided by her mother's passing, Jennette's memoir wouldn't exist.
I wouldn't have written the book if my mom were alive. I would still have my identity dictated by her.
In the end, Jennette leaves her mother's grave with one certainty: this will be her last visit. Since I'm Glad My Mom Died has been published, fans and friends of Jennette have been voicing their praise for the explosive memoir. Despite being close to Jennette, Miranda Cosgrove was shocked by the revelations in the book. "When you're young, you're so in your own head," she told the New York Times. "You can't imagine that people around you are having much harder struggles." She was especially surprised to hear what Jennette had gone through, since the person she knew had never let on about the extent of her hardships. "You don't expect things like that from the person in the room who's making everyone laugh," Miranda said. Other Nickelodeon stars have also spoken out about Jennette's memoir. Josh Peck from Drake and Josh promoted Jennette's memoir to his followers on Instagram. "My friend Jennette wrote a book and it's out today. She's brave, funny, and thoughtful in ways few are," he wrote. Kel Mitchell from All That told Page Six he had fond memories of working with Jennette on Sam and Cat. "I remember what she went through when her mom passed around that time," he told the publication. "So I love hearing her tell her story and being courageous within that." The book has also prompted criticism online of influencers who use their children for content, and Jennette's writing has been described as both harrowing and candid. One Twitter user wrote, "Manifesting Jennette McCurdy's book to give her more money and success than what Nickelodeon's Hush Money could have ever offered." Another wrote, "Jennette McCurdy being so vocal about how she feels about her mom is really important because so many survivors will be pressured with the guilt of, well, your family could be gone one day, so forgive them while they're still alive," by outsiders. It seems the complex emotions she has for her mother are not abnormal for survivors of abuse. Marriage and family therapist Carol McBride described the mourning children of abusive parents go through as a double whammy of grief. They may grieve for the actual person who was their parent, but it also brings back the loss of the parent they didn't have and really needed, she told HuffPost. But there's one mystery that Jennette's memoir leaves readers to solve on their own. Who was the creator? The pseudonymous figure that ruled his sets with an iron fist prompted an online investigation following the release of I'm Glad My Mom Died. But those hoping for challenging detective work were out of luck. Anyone who entered a basic internet search was greeted by articles, videos, and blogs all pointing to the alleged not-so-secret identity of the creator, Dan Schneider. The producer and screenwriter was the mind behind many of the Nickelodeon childhood staples, including iCarly, Sam and Cat, Drake and Josh, Victorious, and The Amanda Show. But in 2021, it was revealed that Dan had been cut from the network after an internal investigation found evidence of verbal abuse towards his colleagues. This investigation appeared to line up with the narrative provided by I'm Glad My Mom Died. In the after portion of the memoir, Jennette revealed that the creator wasn't allowed on set and had to work in a separate room during Sam and Cat after word of the emotional abuse he inflicted on cast and crew had gotten out. And that predatory undertone in Jennette's interactions with the creator, where he seemed to weaponize his power, also sounded familiar to internet users who had long voiced their suspicion over the behavior of the Nickelodeon hitmaker. A compilation of scenes Ariana Grande filmed for Cat's Random Thoughts, an online exclusive series written by Dan, have surfaced since the release of Jennette's memoir.
Have you ever tried to get your whole big toe in your mouth? Check this out.
The skits have been criticized for their suggestive nature
Give up the juice.
and the humor that seems overly adult for the young audience.
Oh man, my uvula got stuck between that hamster's toes.
At the time, many Nickelodeon viewers had seen the content as innocent, but now, not so much. It's the fact as kids we laugh to this. Seeing this as an adult makes me sick to my stomach. The fact that most of us grew up watching this show but never noticed anything weird about it is just mind-blowing. Then there were old vines Jennette posted while on Nickelodeon that people have looked back on with concern. Some theorize that Jennette was hinting at abuse happening on set.
Working on a sitcom. Bruce. Maybe it's just because I'm anemic.
Or even calling out the show's creator by name.
Hey, Dan Schneider. I know you're watching my Vine. Do you like my Vine? Fine. Look what you've done to me.
Clearly, former Nickelodeon watchers have vested interest in uncovering what exactly went down at the network, and what that alleged $300,000 hush money could be keeping under wraps. But it's important this curiosity doesn't overshadow the message of Jennette's memoir. Interviewers, articles, and public discourse have disproportionately focused on the creator, which has not gone unnoticed by the author.
What I will say is that the book is so much more than that. My book is so much more. It cannot be reduced to a headline. My life nor this book can be reduced to a headline.
After After years of therapy, numerous drafts, and the 1.5 years of writing that went into I'm Glad My Mom Died, Jennette is hesitant to let her memoir be defined by 1 or 2 moments. And when you consider that the writer had been tied to her childhood since iCarly, it's not hard to understand her resistance.
I want to be sure to celebrate the positive aspects of the book and the humor and healing that the book has to offer, which I think is just so much more important.
Since her memoir's release, I'm Glad My Mom Died has become a #1 New York Times bestseller, a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and has been named one of Amazon Editor's Best Biographies and Memoirs of August. The book has received a level of readership and acclaim even Jennette didn't see coming.
I'm so thrilled with the reaction. I never expected this to happen. It's been kind of blowing my mind.
And despite the media's emphasis on the more clickbait-worthy moments of the memoir, the overall message was still resonating with readers. Now, when people approach Jennette, they aren't calling her Sam or using a shtick from iCarly, but are looking to talk about her book.
And it just feels like there's such a different level of humanity there and emotional connection. And so to have that with people now who approach me is a complete 180 from before, and I really appreciate it.
In the end, I'm Glad My Mom Died is a book about the detrimental and lasting effects unfit mothering have on a child. Deborah used her daughter as an outlet for her own unrealized dreams, insecurities, and disordered tendencies. Her mother's lack of self-work meant Jennette was forced to fight those inherited battles long after Deborah passed.
That was a really difficult thing for me to come to terms with, was not the issues that she had, but the fact that she chose not to work on those issues.
But there was one gift Jennette's mother's passing left her with, the chance to move on. Jennette could recover from her ED, she could evolve her mindset, and, in her greatest feat, she could cut her ties with child stardom. I want to do good work. I want to do work I'm proud of. This matters to me on a deep, inherent level. I want to make a difference, or at least feel like I'm making a difference through my work. Without that feeling, that connection, the work feels pointless and vapid. I feel pointless and vapid, the author had written in her memoir. And it seems, through writing, Jennette has found that missing connection. Jennette's passion-driven career is only beginning, as the author is currently working on a novel and a collection of essays.
My life has never felt so in tune with sort of what I want and what I hope, and so that's a really, really cool feeling.
And recently, Jennette has expressed an interest in possibly returning to acting on her own terms.
Over the past few months, I've been able to consider maybe there's a way that I could act. Maybe I write a role for myself. Maybe there's a way that I can act and heal that relationship with acting, as opposed to carrying the baggage from my past.
But whatever Jennette decides to pursue next, that choice is finally hers to make. Through carefully curated and crafted chapters, I'm Glad My Mom Died captures the dysfunction, the horror, and even the humor of Jennette's life before and after her mother passed away.
Life is never one thing. My life absolutely has never been one thing. It's usually happy and sad at the same time, and laughable and tragic at the same time, oftentimes in the same room.
It's this respect for complexity that Jennette approaches each element of her story with, whether that's acting, inner turmoil.
For me, facing the parts of myself that I felt the most shame about, facing those and becoming public with those has been really healing for me and transformative.
Or her relationship with her mother.
I kept just clinging to the narratives that she'd conditioned me to have.
Through I'm Glad My Mom Died, the reader is faced with the hard truth that Jennette's life couldn't start without the passing of her mother.
And I truly believe the only reason I'm able to have an identity of my own and to have fulfillment is because she died.
And for that, the author's glad. This is the story of Jennette McCurdy, the writer who took back the life that was stolen from her.